Welcome back to the HTML tutorial series. In our last video, we created our first web page, index.html, and launched it from VS Code using Live Server. In this video, we'll explore some common HTML elements you'll add to the body section of your document to display content on the page. Before we get started modifying our index.html document, I want to show you a great resource for HTML, and that's the w3schools.com HTML tutorial site. You can find it by launching your browser and searching for w3schools space HTML, then clicking the HTML tutorial link. I'd encourage you to access this page and bookmark it, as you'll use it frequently while learning HTML, and it's a great resource to use while following my tutorial series. On this page, you'll see a list of topics on the left. These will start to make more sense as we progress through the videos in this playlist. However, as an example on how to use this site, we'll click the HTML basic link, then explore the content on the page. If you watched the prior video on this channel, the content on this page should look familiar. It talks about basic HTML documents and that each HTML document must start with the doc type declaration. Also, it indicates that the HTML document itself must start with an HTML and end with a closing HTML tag, and that the visible part of the HTML document, what you see on the page, is written between the open and closed body tags. If you scroll down a little more, it'll give you detailed information on the doc type declaration and then some other HTML tags, which we'll actually take a look at when we start coding in this video. What I'd like to show you though is the try it yourself button in the example. If you click that, it'll open another tag where you have a chance to execute the code on the left by clicking the run button, which will show the results on the right. You can actually modify this code on the left and execute it and see the results. So this site is a great place for HTML information and examples that you can actually try within the Try It editor, and then if you'd like, copy the code from here and paste it into your own HTML document. But for now, we'll close the browser, open a terminal, make it a little bigger, and get ready to launch VS Code. So as practice as a terminal, let's type pwd to see where we are. And we're in the home folder for my user. Do a ls-al to see a listing of the directory and files. Here's the development folder that we want to work in, so we'll cd into the development folder. ls-al shows we have only a folder in here, so we'll cd into the tutorials folder. ls-al shows an HTML folder, which will cd into, and then finally if we do a listing in here, we'll see our index.html file. So this is the folder that we left off in from the last video. So as a reminder, we can launch VS Code straight from the terminal by typing the code command space and dot for the current folder. We'll go ahead and launch VS Code, and here we are in the index.html file that we left off in previously. I'll start by selecting all the text on this page with Command A, hitting the delete key, and I'll paste in some new code that we'll look at together. First, I'll save the file, and let's take a look and see what it looks like in the browser. And clearly we have our content on the page, but the formatting isn't correct. And that's because the browser ignores spaces in the HTML. Whether you have a single space between words, double spaces, 10 spaces, or even a line break, the browser treats all of those as a single space. If we want the text to be formatted correctly when the user views the web page, we need to use HTML elements to tell the browser how to format the text for display. So let's jump back into the code and make those formatting changes. However, before we start actually adding our elements, I want to point out this text in green. This is an HTML comment, and it's put in the document not for the user's benefit, but for the developers. And we typically add comments to our code to describe what the code is doing. Now, this is a pretty straightforward comment. It's not very complex code here, but it says that I'm starting my HTML heading here and ending it here. So this is the heading for the page. If we go back and look at the page in the browser, right, we see our content, but we don't see the comment. However, if I were to right click and view the page source, the comment is in the code, but it's ignored by the browser because of the HTML comment tags. And the format for the tag starts with a less than, exclamation dash dash, and finishes with a dash dash greater than. So anything wrapped within these opening and closing comment tags will be included in the HTML that's sent to the browser, but the browser will ignore it and not display it to the user. Comments are important in your code for the developers, not just other developers who may have to maintain your code going forward, but for you as well. If you write some code and have to revisit it a month from now, 6 months from now, you may not remember exactly why you added a particular piece of code. So adding comments to the code will make it more descriptive and easier to understand and maintain. Okay, now that I'm off my developer soapbox, let's take a look at some HTML elements we could use to better format the content on the page. And a great source for finding those elements is W3 Schools. So if we go to the W3 Schools homepage and scroll down the menu on the left, under the HTML references section, we'll find the HTML tag list. And this page will list all the HTML elements that you could use in your code. Now, since we're new to HTML, we're not exactly sure which tag we can use to force line breaks or paragraphs within our content. So if we were to search for a description of the element, say line break, we wouldn't find a match because there is no HTML element named line space break. So an easy way to search on this page is to use the Command F keys to bring up the page search. Here we could type in line break, hit enter, and we'll be taken to an element in the list, the BR, which defines a single line break. If you knew the name of the tag that you're searching for, you could type it into the search field, and again we see here's the BR, which defines a single line break. If we click on the tag name, we'll be taken to the descriptive page for that tag, and it tells us that the BR tag inserts a single line. With that knowledge in hand, let's return to our code and add some formatting. So we probably want to have some spacing between our header and our description, and between the description and the footer. So we know that we can insert a line break tag here, and let's add another one down here. Save the code, revisit the page in the browser, and we'll see that that formatting has been applied. The heading is on its own line, the descriptive paragraph is in its own section, and then the footer is on its own line. However, this probably isn't the formatting that we're looking for. What we really would like to do is make this description its own paragraph within the page. So knowing that the line break tag forces a single line break, we could append another line break to the existing breaks that we have, save the code, view it in the browser, and this looks better. However, that's not really proper use of the line break tag. The line break is for single line breaks. To force content into a paragraph, we use the P tag, the HTML paragraph, which defines a paragraph. So if we return to our code and replace the line breaks with HTML paragraph tags wrapped around our content, and view this in the browser, we see we have the formatting that we're looking for using the proper HTML element. Now there is still the opportunity to use the line break tag. We know in our code we have two separate sentences that we'd like to have separated from one another. So if we force a line break between the end of the first sentence and the beginning of the second, we'll get that formatting. So going back to our code, here we can add our line break, save it, view it in the browser, and now we have the formatting that we're looking for. So let's take our knowledge of the line break and the paragraph tabs one step further and add a little more content to the page. So between the description and the footer, we'll add a list of planets. I'll put the list in its own paragraph and separate the planets with line breaks. If we save this and revisit the page in the browser, we see we now have our list of planets separated from the description and the footer, with each planet on its own line in the paragraph due to use of the line break tags. Before we end this video, there are two more HTML elements I'd like to take a look at. The first is the div. And the div tag defines a division or section in an HTML document. It's used as a container for other HTML elements. So if we go back to our code, what we could do is wrap all of our content in div tags to define specific divisions within our page. This won't necessarily change the formatting of the display, but it provides containers for distinct areas of our page. And by doing so, this will really come in handy as we progress through the tutorial series and start adding ID attributes and class attributes to these divs to better style the page using CSS. But for now, let's just wrap the individual sections of content in our page with div elements. And using the magic of video, I've gone ahead and added a div to each section. So I've wrapped the solar system heading in a div. I've wrapped the paragraph of primary content for the description in a div, the same with the planet list, and the same with the footer. If we revisit the page in the browser, it still looks the same, but we've added more structure to our code, which we could build upon later. The final HTML element I'd like to look at in this video is the span tag. And the span is used as an inline container to mark up part of a text or part of a document. It has no impact on the display or the formatting of the content contained within the tag, but it's very useful when using CSS or JavaScript to style or manipulate the content therein. So for now, we'll go back to the code, and all I want to do is wrap part of the footer in a span. So I'll add span tags around the link to Wikipedia, save the page, revisit in the browser, and you can see there's no change to the content displayed on the page. So in this video, we started adding some formatting to the page using the paragraph and line break elements, and also added structure to the code using the div and span. These will become quite useful when we add CSS and JavaScript to the page later. And we also learned how to use W3 Schools as a resource for development. In the next video, we'll look at the HTML lists, headings, and horizontal rule elements.